So this video is going to be the first impressions of the Lumix S9. ZVE1 is here, Lumix S9 is here, and the Canon R8 is here. So I've rented this camera for about a week for work. I wanted to use the opportunity to not only test it out for content creation for work stuff, as well as whether or not it would be a recommendation for some of our colleagues that work with us, and to also see whether or not it would make for a appropriate replacement for my Canon EOS M6 Mark II. Now, the curiosities that I have with relation to the S9, specifically one had to do with handling, right? My assumption was that I would need to have a side grip, but I would want something that is not too big and not too obtrusive. The Sure side grip here, it's got a little cold shoe on the bottom, in addition to one having something on the top. So this way, if I wanted to convert the top cold shoe into a NATO, I can easily do that, as I've just done here. And I got some quarter 20 threads right there on top that I can go ahead and use. And that way, if I wanted to do an easy rig, where if I have, say, a bigger lens, then I could just go ahead and attach a nice minimal top handle, easy to use type of setup. Everything I'm mentioning here is basically my first impressions from the last 24 hours of having held this. So this video is actually being done within the first 24 hours. Shot some footage with it, played around with it, just to kind of get myself familiarized before I head out for a work project that I'm going to be on for the next several days. And that's what I'm going to be using this for. But the thing that I do appreciate is basically having a flip out screen. This is especially important when I'm taking photos like this. Being able to see, essentially, when you're looking at the picture, being able to see this is invaluable. I can't really do that on the M6 Mark II. So if I look at it like this, there's no way to really flip around the screen. It's been an annoyance. For video and things like that, this actually is nice because it's really nice and portable. And even when I'm shooting jiu-jitsu content, just simply having this up here, it reduces the width profile. And this is actually pretty nice. One of the things I wish they had done for this is simply just a flip out screen. It would have been nice if it also flipped up. And I know the S1H, if I remember correctly, has that four-way articulating screen. So you can flip the thing this way and you can flip it out. So it would have been nice if they included it here, but they didn't. So that's just one of the things I noticed. The other thing that really kind of bummed me out a little bit, I forgot that a lot of people just kind of just glanced over this element, right? So one of the things I've always appreciated about Panasonic generally in the past is the side entry for the SD cards, right? The ZVE1 has this, but the ZVE10 and the M6 Mark II, their SD card entry is from the bottom. And that right there is a super noise. Now, the thing is, with this grip, I guess the machining is not very accurate. It's actually a little tight. So to get the battery compartment opened, the SD card insert is from the bottom. Don't like it, not a fan of it. And I wish they had not done that, but it's not a deal breaker. It's something that I'm willing to tolerate. Now, the other thing that I noticed, so sometimes on my cameras, just to make it easier for me to handle, I will attach a little thing like this. So if it's my GH5, I will attach this. It just makes holding this thing that much easier. Have some place to kind of place my thumb, right? So it's a nice little accessory. Fits in snug. And same thing on the EOS M. Now on the EOS M6 Mark II, I have a cold shoe here that I can place my thumb, but in addition to that, if I wanted, I could just kind of slide this in and I have this. But the only issue is on the EOS M6 Mark II, it blocks the rotation for that the dial function right over here, and so for that reason I don't use it. But it's not a big deal because I have some place to keep my thumb. On the S9, I don't really have some place to keep my thumb. This is even after I've added the little grip here. It's kind of sort of like there's a little bit of a lip here. I can kind of sort of do that. Putting this thing on would have been great. Now I can slide it in there, but once I slide it in, it feels perfect. It doesn't go in on the why. It's pressing up against the LUT button and the autofocus button, which brings me to my next point, the placement of some of these buttons. Now, I understand the reason they might have placed these buttons here is because you want ready access to it with your thumb, but I would rather that these two buttons be moved over so that I could use the thing for my thumb, because this lip is just not enough. I think they deliberately created that lip to make it easier, and I understand it's better than nothing, but I can see how over time that can become a little bit annoying. Now, again, not a deal breaker, but it's a little annoyance that I feel like is gonna become apparent. Now, the cool thing is you have a little dial here. You can use this to adjust your aperture, and then you got the dial here that allows you to adjust your shutter speed. By default, you can change it to whatever it is that you want. So just in terms of the clickety clack, I like the tactile feel of the top dial, but the back dial is a little loose, a little finicky, and I've hit it a few times without realizing I hit it, and I adjusted my shutter speed. So one of those things that I just kind of need to be cognizant and pay attention to. I like how there is a red record button, but I would have rather that it would be up here instead of it being down to the side. I also wish this thing had a tally light. I guess it has a tally light, but whenever I've done any recording, I haven't seen it turn on. Maybe it's because it's something I have to enable. I don't know. It's one of those things I have to look into. But just in terms of, again, just with relation to the button layout and things like that, it's a little annoying. You got a mic input, which functions great. The other thing that I found that is a huge positive, which automatically, in my mind, puts it above the Canon R8. So if I were to, right now, after just a day of placing this, ZV-E1 is here. The Lumix S9 is here, and the Canon R8 is here. Just overall. But I'll kind of go into one of the reasons why. One of the things that was a deal breaker on the Canon R8 for me was that going into enhanced digital IS, it would give me this funky head following thing. Now, that just essentially rendered the enhanced digital IS completely null and void for me. Wouldn't be something that I would be able to use it. And it seems that this is a common trend amongst Canon cameras as of late, whether it is the Canon R8 or the Canon R6 Mark II, or even the new R5 Mark II. People who have used it have mentioned that being a little quirk. And so just from my perspective, it just becomes completely useless. And so if I'm to use any kind of stabilization, it would be IBIS plus just standard digital, no high. And so the reason that's a bummer for me is because one of the things I like to do many times is to take, like, this is a Tokina 14 to 20 millimeter f2 lens. This is a crop sensor lens. And so putting it on a full frame body, now at 20 millimeters, I almost get full coverage, but not quite. However, with the digital IS, it punches in just enough so that, the vignetting is gone. But then when I get the head follow thing, it just ruins it. Whereas on the Lumix S9, I can have IBIS, I can have the digital stabilization, the E-stabilization, and then you have different intensities of that. You can even go high, it'll pop in a little bit more, and it seemingly looks great. I just shot some recent footage earlier, just at home with the kid, on the Tokina. I shot some footage with the 40 millimeter f2.8. I also shot some footage with the 24 millimeter f1.4, which is what I'm recording on right now. And it all looks good. And I think these three lenses just intuitively, instinctually were my first three lenses that I gravitated towards on this camera. The 14 to 20 being my ultra wide, the 24 being my standard, and my 40 just being that tight sort of detailed shot. And I don't see myself going beyond 40 millimeters. Like 50 is a little too tight. 40 is just wide enough so that if I were to also capture some of myself, I can still do that. And if I wanted to go tighter, I can go into APS-C mode, and I get myself something like a 60 or 65 millimeter with the E-stabilization turned on. So that right there becomes a versatile kit, just between these three lenses. And if I were to just only have like two lenses, I would probably consider the Tokina and the 14 to 20 and the 24, because the 24 can turn into a 35 with the added E-stabilization. I can make it into a 40 to 45. So that's just gives me a lot of options, especially with all the crop options. And I'm still in 4K. I still have enough info or rather, I have enough resolution for me to continue recording at the quality that I want. And even at that, it is still better than the images coming out of the EOS M6 Mark II. Now, one thing that kind of was annoying, especially the 30 minutes, the Lumix Lab app was not working for me. I installed it, and I got the app to open up on my Android phone, my Pixel 8 Pro, and the issue is that whenever I'm trying to connect to it through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, is just I go into this loop of trying to connect to the thing, and then it connects to it, and then it says, the error connection, and then I go and find out what's the Wi-Fi. I try to connect with the Wi-Fi, and then it just kind of sends me to this loop. I've not been able to successfully connect to the camera through my phone using the Lumix Lab app, and that's after about 30 minutes of fiddling with it. And I like to consider myself as somebody who is more or less tech savvy, and to run into this issue and get frustrated to the point where it's like, why even bother, was a bit disappointing. Now, it's not that big a deal in the sense that I know the Lumix, at least from the marketing and everything that people put out, they're really focusing on your ability to transfer photos, which is cool, but my thing is I'm looking at it from a video perspective, and I was hoping to even transfer some of these videos. Now, one thing that I found was that when I recorded some of the 6K footage, the 6K looks great, but the issue is that if I copy the 6K footage onto my phone through a USB-C dongle, like something like this, then what ends up happening is the phone is not able to read it. It's just file format is too advanced. The MOV files phone is just like, nah, not today. And so I tapered it down to same MOV file format, but 4K, not OpenGate. And then it still gave me the same issue. It wasn't until I went to MP4 format that I was able to then copy the file onto my phone. My phone was able to play it back. And I could also edit the footage on my phone. So now the upside is that, well, on one hand, the MP4 files are about 70 some megabits per second, whereas the files on the M6 Mark II are about 115 megabits per second. On the ZVE10, they're 90 megabits per second. So I don't know the difference in the quality, but just based on the data rate, if there's a lot of stuff happening on the scene, where I'm talking everything from textures, detail, and things like that, dynamic movement, then it may not be up to the same quality. We're talking about 25% less bit rate than the Canon M6 Mark II, which is an MOV file. Now, when I go to, that's an MP4 file, but if I go to MOV, I get 150 megabits per second, and I can go higher, I think 200 or so with the OpenGate option. And so all of that, you still get more details in those options, but the trade-off is that I can't edit that content on my phone, which many times I do. And so I guess the versatility of this, but to be fair, because I'm looking at it from the perspective of like, this camera can record an S-Log 2, 3, and HLG, but there's no baked-in LUT option. Canon's image that comes out from here, straight out of camera, is actually really good. It's just that when it comes to the dynamic range, especially in a brighter setting, it's either going to get crushed shadows or blown out highlights. Now, generally speaking, it's not that big a deal, but from somebody who kind of sees that on the regular, it just becomes something that is a source of annoyance for me. Now, on this and the S9 as well as the ZVE1, you have the option of baking in a LUT. So you can import a LUT, and you can go into, for example, on the E1, you can go into S-Log 3 and then apply the LUT. It'll bake that LUT in. Looks great. And then I can bring that into, if I recall, I can bring that into my phone because it's H.265. And so as a result, my phone is able to play that back. Whereas this, it's MOV. Well, whether it's MOV or MP4, I can do Vlog. And then that Vlog is applying a Vlog to Rec. 709 LUT, expanding the full look, and this is what the footage ends up looking like, and it looks good. I think sharpness is turned all the way down, saturation is whatever the default is, and there is no noise reduction being applied, and so this is the look of it, and so it just generally looks good. But if I wanted to be able to go ahead and straight up take, because the ZVE1 is essentially giving me better quality bit rate in the H.265 files with the baked-in LUT than the S9. But the S9 is giving me more options in terms of what I can use with it. Now, the cool thing, and I think I'll conclude with this just in terms of the first impression, the cool thing is that so far, I did not rent any native lenses with the camera. I got the MC21 EF to L mount adapter, and so far every EF lens that I have used, and I'll tell you which ones I have used, but I'm going to probably do a separate video testing all of the EF lenses that I have at a later date. But all the EF lenses I've used today, which includes this, the 40mm f2.8, the Tokina 14 to 20mm f2, the 24mm f1.4, the Tamron 28 to 105mm f2.8, wonderful lens by the way, the Tokina 28 to 70mm f2.8, the Sigma Art 30mm f1.4, from Sigma, obviously. These are the lenses, I think that, and the Sigma 18 to 35. This guy right here, the Sigma 18 and 35. So these are all the lenses that I tested out on the camera today, and all of them, I say this, all of them, their autofocus works just as good as it would on the Canon. So that right there is a huge perk. I love that. And so, however, there is a little quirk. So at 12,000 and 25,600, the autofocus seems to have gone kaput. Okay, so that's very interesting. At 12,800, autofocus works just fine. But the moment, so if I, at 20,000, nope, autofocus turned off. 16,000, no continuous autofocus. But 12,800 continuous autofocus picks back up again. Up to 12,800 ISO, autofocus functions fine. But the moment it passes that, with an adapted lens through the MC21, the autofocus shuts off. It does not continue to operate. The moment you pass 12,800, no autofocus. So anything beyond that, 16,000, 20,000, 25,600, 52,000, whatever, right? There's no autofocus. There's all manual focus at that point. 12,800 is the limit to which you get autofocus, at least from what I noticed, which was weird, which then kind of made me a little upset because the Canon R8 and the R6 Mark II, their autofocus continued to function up until 200,000 ISO, if I'm not mistaken. I've done a video on the low light noise of that. So, and in fact, I would consider that if Canon made a firmware update or came out with a new camera with the ability to bake in a LUT in the C-Log profile, whether it's C-Log 2 or 3 or whatever, right? That itself would probably make it something that would be worth considering. However, the IBIS on this thing is just wonderful. There's still further testing and comparison to be done. But one of the things I noticed is that obviously GyroFlow is going to outperform IBIS any day of the week. However, when it comes to GyroFlow versus in-body image stabilization coupled with the E-stabilization on high, then it's very close. And when it comes to the regular day-to-day stuff, it's negligible. Now, if rolling shutter were to be an issue, I think at that point with the E-stabilization turned on, I think the rolling shutter is almost seemingly mitigated because you're cropped a little bit more. But I don't know. It's one of those things where I was not noticing the rolling shutter at all. Whereas on the ZV-E10, it's clear as day. So this is something that I noticed. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Some of the other things I'm going to be looking forward to is just to kind of do a more detailed comparison of GyroFlow versus IBIS in both full frame modes and Super 35 APS-C modes. Is the autofocus acceptable with relation to the dynamic setting within a dynamic setting with EF lenses? I don't know yet. The most dynamic thing I've done today since I got this camera, since it arrived, is just play with my kid. And if you're wondering why I keep holding my ribs in jiu-jitsu, I got squeezed real bad, so my ribs seem like it's kind of out of place. The other thing I was curious about is how limiting is the recording limit on this guy for the work that I want to do. Now, I did notice when, if I'm doing a talking head piece like this, like for example, right now, whenever I record a video like this, I'll go on for 30 to 40 minutes, maybe an hour max, and then I'll cut that down to something like 20 minutes or so. I don't know if I could do that on here. Now, I'm not recording on the camera, I'm recording directly on the computer, so I don't know how much of a problem that will be, but it's something to take into consideration. In my first day, I've come upon a lot of different little quirks with the S9 that, and coupled with like, oh, this is also gives me a good picture. It gives me a good image despite the quirks. But it's in stark contrast to the sentiment and feeling that I got when I was using the ZV-E1. In the first day that I got that, I don't recall experiencing any quirks. And maybe it just has to do with the fact that I've been using Sony cameras a lot more than I've been using Panasonic cameras, because my Panasonic camera usage has been on micro four thirds for the most part, and a little bit on the S1H for they're not my cameras, they're when I get that footage from them, because I'll do the editing for some of the stuff that they shoot sometimes, and the footage is just amazing. The picture that comes out of Panasonic cameras is I love it. It's especially with the vlog, apply the Rec 709 and then work from there. It's very easy to work with. The files do tend to be a little bit heavy, so I always got to work with proxies. Kind of made it part of my workflow regardless of what I'm shooting on. Even if I shoot cell phone footage, I'll just create proxies just as part of my operation of how I process everything. So it's not that big a deal, but it's one of those things where if I'm shooting multiple angles, it becomes really, really heavy. So, but yeah, I guess that's just the stark contrast. And maybe it has to do with expectations, right? I guess the expectation that I have here is, does this give me the convenience while also beating out the EOS M6 Mark II as a possible replacement camera? Because I like the fact that I have both APS-C and full frame modes on this camera, but I don't know what the image quality looks like, and that's something I want to be comparing at a future date. So with that, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. If there's any curiosities that you have with relation to the S9 that you'd like me to explore, do let me know in the comments below. I'll see you soon.